We're giving people a chance to migrate over. Ooh, celebrity sighting. It looks like we have Eric Hansen here.
Hello.
Hey, Eric.
Just thought I'd stop in and see how things are going. Please.
Waiting for people to wander over. I think so by now you and I are very good at hopping between panels.
Yeah.
Everyone else has quite the level of experience we have.
Yeah, I'm in two of them, actually. Three at the same time.
Well, thank you for joining us here for now.
Yeah. By all means, just keep on keeping on. I'll just kind of lurk here for a while, if that's okay.
Absolutely. We'll give it a few more minutes, hoping more people come. But you're muted, Eric.
I thought you had started already. Didn't want to interrupt.
No, I'm waiting for more people to migrate over. I give them a couple minutes from the previous one, but
Yeah.
somehow it seems to take a little time. Also, I think people take little breaks between.
Yeah, that makes sense. Scheduling these back to back, it's kind of a lot. So that's possible as well. How'd the last session go?
It was good. Covered a lot of territory. And we recorded it, so you can see it on the recording.
That's right. Yeah, and all of these are going to be available on demand through the agenda.
Right.
So I don't know. Some people might be figuring that, hey, I'll just check this out later. I'm going to let Craig record it, and then I'll watch it later. So we have Nona and Scott. Are y'all ever able to speak in this session?
I can make it that way. I'm kind of thinking of just changing the mode of the session.
Yeah, why not?
Right here.
If you can give them the chance to speak.
Let's see if that worked. So if that worked, everyone should be able to unmute.
How did you do that? I wasn't able to do that.
I changed it to a virtual room from a webinar. There we go.
Wow, you've got this worked out. Where did you do that?
It's under settings.
That's awesome.
This is great. So people can feel free to interrupt me and ask questions as we go along.
Yeah.
So Nona, if you want to hit your mic button or camera button, and you can make yourself live by hitting the live button if you're inclined. If not, you can just sit back and enjoy yourself. All right, we're 5 minutes in, so I think I'm just going to go ahead, and people can catch it on the recording if they're not here. So I'm going to be talking about communicating and managing content rights, which is more often known as avails. I'm going to actually take my picture down here because it's blocking the screen. There we go. So just to be clear, I am not a lawyer, and I'm not using legal terms here, but I am talking about, we're talking about licensing, not rights. In other words, licensing is sort of conveyance of rights.
Are you still at the market?
Oh, hold on a second. I don't think Heidi knows she's on. Okay. And then, so we have lots of names for things: licensors, distributors, content owners, so forth, and licensees, networks, retailers, platforms. For the context of this discussion, they all kind of mean the same thing. So we're just gonna go with that. So we talk about what, when, and how much. So the what is a group of assets, and within the assets, like which languages and so forth is supported. The when is what are the windows involved? What are the start and end dates? Conditions that the content needs to be held back in and so forth. Sometimes those dates are real dates. Sometimes they're open. Sometimes they're 30 days after EST or something like that, tied to other events. The how much there's a whole variety of business terms that go along with it and more. So there might be restrictions on playback or agreements about what subs and dubs will be delivered. And those are what would compromise the license information that we're passing along. So some of this is visible. I mean, if you see language entitlements or pricing or this is eligible for movies anywhere, those are all terms that just show up in the avail, but show up on the display based on what happened in the avail. So let's sort of break it down from a more data-centric view. What is the information you're conveying? And in this case, I'm going to group the information to support data, business terms, and assets. Now, this particular picture is TVOD, which is rental, electronic sell-through, and premium VOD. What's unique about these models, oops, someone is changing my slides. Please don't do that. Is that you have, so by the way, this is set up so anyone can actually jump in and ask questions or anything. So I've made it more of a discussion than a presentation. So just keep that in mind when you're not on mute, for example. What's unique about these is that there's a buy button or acquire button. And what's interesting about the buy and acquire button is it usually correlates one-to-one with the business terms. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. When you're talking about a subscription model or an advertising model, there's no buy button, but essentially everything else is the same. You still have the business terms, the assets, and support data, but just the business terms usually apply more broadly than just the single title and how it relates to a buy button. Then, of course, you have metadata and fulfillment data along the way that comes along for the ride. So let's go through these one by one. So when I talk about support data, there's a bunch of kind of bookkeeping information. That's going to be a key part of the licensing information. It's just there to help keep everything organized. The first is going to be some kind of identification, and we're not going to go into what an ALID is in this conversation, but there's specific ways to identify offers, and ALID is the preferred method. Then you'll have publisher. You may have the platform it's going to, disposition. Like is this agreed upon or not? Some kind of short description. Some just useful for processing of the overall record. Next, you have the assets because this is the what. So we have said it is a single asset. It's a group of assets, and the description of it is not just metadata that goes in front of the consumer. There's a lot of useful information here in terms of what what storefront it goes on and whether or not it even goes up at all. For example, you have obvious things like identification and title, but like ratings might say, well, we don't take anything that's R or above. So ratings might be a filter that's used just to exclude content, or it might put it in a different part of the user interface. You're going to keep hearing the talk about identification. Everything is identified, and identification is really important. So, there's another topic which is beyond the scope of this presentation. There are some videos about this on our website and so forth, but keep in mind that all conversations lead back to identification. The metadata is there not for the user interface. And that's something that's sometimes confused is, I have metadata in the avail, I'll just use that. That's a bad idea. It's not targeted towards that. The data is there to support processing, not to support the user. That data should come from somewhere else. It should be much more rich, probably localized and so forth. So now we're down to the business terms, and this is what people typically think of as the sort of meaty part of the avail. It's everything that's associated with the the title as it relates to time and date and costs and when you can announce it and anything else that's kind of businessy. Sometimes these things exist in a contract. So by default, in this territory, the languages are X, Y, Z, or the dates when you can announce are so many days before the title is available for pre-order. Sometimes it's on a per title basis. When it's on a per title basis, it goes directly into the business terms associated with a specific offer. And the offer itself can get very specific. It can be, this is for, a 2-week window, or then it maybe the pricing changes, and you can have temporary price reductions and other things like that make these things extremely specific. But any detail that goes into what the offer looks like and appears at, will appear, in the marketplace, whatever that is, subscription or for sale, are defined by the business terms. The different business models have a very high degree of overlap. So they always have start and end dates. They always have languages. They always have format profiles. They always have when you can announce things. Suppression lift is a term related to when things can be announced. They always have the region, the licenses for a particular region. Some things are specific to the model. So, for example, TVOD, transactional VOD, which includes sale, rental, and so forth, has pricing. In SVOD, there might be a price across all titles, and so there won't be any specific pricing associated with that offer at all. So there's a few fields that come and go depending on what type of business model it is. But in general, and this is a really important point, the information is the same regardless of the business model. We started off with an exercise to say, okay, we did TVOD first. We said, okay, let's add SVOD. And the initial thought was, oh, we're going to have to do a new spec. Until we realized that I think we came down, there were 8 new fields we added as a part of doing SVOD, and 6 or 7 of them were applicable to TVOD. We just hadn't really directly addressed them in the TVOD discussions. So think in terms of, this is the information I need for licensing regardless of the business model, and then just select the specific terms that are associated with that business model. So there's always those things that make things interesting. So one thing that's come up multiple times, especially in big studios, is that it could be different departments. So you have your marketing department, you have people doing promotions within the marketing department, you have the people who generate the general licensing and the avails. You might have people working on campaigns. You might have a different team doing bonus content than is doing the main features. So what happens is all this information has to make its way to a platform one way or another. And we started with the position, oh, well, the studio will just collect all this information and send it over. Turns out that's not really a practical consideration or a practical way of doing it. So what we came up with is kind of out-of-bound messages where you could just do temporary price reductions as its own thing. And guess what's really important to making that work? Yes, you guessed it, identifiers. So there's certain information that you have to share between departments, in particular identification, but then it's allowed to have information coming from multiple places. Still some risk because there might be competing information, but that's how we found is the most practical way to do it. Campaigns are things that are kind of also out of band. They're not part of the normal flow of things. Someone comes in and says, we'd like to bundle these things together, or we might want to have buy 2 get 1 free, whatever it may be. and it's going to require some special logic for it, but it's and it can be communicated through the same avails process or same avails and title list process, but it has to be managed separately. And as I mentioned also for bonus, sometimes bonus comes from separate places. Sometimes they even have their own terms. You might have bonus content ahead of the feature, for example. So if you pre-order the content, you get immediate access to bonus. That requires a separate avails process for bonus. So these are some things that make things more interesting. We just had a panel on international, and I'll just generalize to say that anything international makes it interesting. There's for starters, there's going to be a lot more avails because you're going to have one per territory. There's going to be probably more languages. There's going to be multiple currencies and so on and so forth. So anything international always makes things interesting. Status is not really interesting in the same way, but it's still interesting. There's a status associated with various aspects of the supply chain. So you might be talking about status for the offer. You might be talking about status of particular assets and so forth. This is specifically around the status of the offer, but you need to know, did you receive it? Is it, do you have everything for it to go live? What date do you actually plan to put it up live? That's one where there's sometimes miscommunication, and the results can be catastrophic. You don't want to put a title up early because that there could be financial penalties for that. You don't want a title to go up late because there might be financial loss because of it. So one studio actually justified their entire avails activity based on the potential miscommunication of dates. And all you need is someone to get burned a couple of times on a big title, and they're going to be scrambling for a solution. Announcements also an interesting area because the marketing people are very careful about when things are announced and when trailers come out and so on and so forth. So that little diagram on the right, people were using terms like announce date for pre-order, announce date for EST, start a pre-order, start EST, end, announce. So there's all these different relationships between different fields. So we had to actually break it down and define what each of those meant for pre-order and EST in terms of the various dates that line up. The good news is that we did document it, so now it's unambiguous what dates are meant when you put them in. But again, like I said, made things interesting. By the way, if anyone has any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat, or if you want, you can just speak up. I've made it so that anyone can talk if they want to. All right, preferred specs. So I'm biased. The OTT.X is biased as an organization because OTT.X used to be EMA, and as you can see, it's called EMA Avails. So this was out of a study done in Europe. So I don't have an equivalent study in the United States, but I imagine the numbers probably aren't too different. Probably a little bit more adoption of EMA Avails in the United States. But this says in Europe, roughly a third of everybody is using EMA Avails, and 2/3 are using custom specs or proprietary specs. Our goal is to increase the EMA adoption and reduce the custom. They didn't find any other standards, so to speak, as having much traction. So you can find some things in Cable Labs ADI. Obviously, that wouldn't be used in Europe. Although surprisingly, in the metadata front, there was a fair amount of Cable Labs VOD metadata being used. Still not as much as these specs, but some. But it didn't show up on their radar on the Avail side. So if you want to adopt a spec and you're not dealing with Apple, you're pretty much looking at EMA Avails as the standard. There are two flavors. One is XML and one is Excel. Each has their specific benefits. The advantage of XML is it moves more easily into automation, but there's a whole other discussion about which spec is the most appropriate one there, but which we can have at another time. But that is the the preferred method and one we recommend. If you look at the Movie Labs digital distribution framework, which is illustrated on the right, the avails and title list. By the way, the difference between an avail is an option for something. It's like I think in a session earlier it was described as a menu where you can pick items off the menu. The title list is a bilaterally agreed upon list, and it says, okay, we've negotiated. We've said, here's the list, and it's not an all or nothing, but you've already agreed that the whole thing is on the list. In SVOD, it's usually a title list. In TVOD, it's usually an avail, but they're the same spec. The spec is called avails and title list. There's also in the spec an offer status that comes back and gives the status of the offer. All those different things I mentioned. Is it has been accepted? Is it ready to go? What dates it's going up on, and so forth. Another thing worth noting is, as you see, there's other lines in this diagram. You can use avails by itself, and many people do, but it also does connect to the other pieces in here. So it'll take you all the way through delivery and so forth. There's other specs for that, but here's an illustration. So you have an avail. It has an identifier in it, the ALID, which I mentioned before. The ALID connects to Media Manifest. You have content IDs for metadata. You have media delivered, and it all comes together. So the Media Manifest is something that defines all the fulfillment process part of it. So anyhow, so through, again, identifiers, you connect all the pieces, and you can get all the way from the avail down to the individual bits that are the asset itself. And so by way of resources, there's a whole bunch of specs. There's some video that you can, class kinds of things, can get bits and, learn little segments. They're designed to be like 3 to 10 minutes on particular topics, so you can learn about these things. Some people use those when they're onboarding people, for example, or just evaluating whether something's worth using. There's some examples and best practices, and the links are provided there. And then there's also source code, which is useful for parsing, and we do translation between the XML and Excel. And there's also online validators. So if you're in the process of creating avails and title lists, then you can use these. At this point, I was going to open up for questions. I see I have one. Is a video of this presentation going to be available to share with our respective teams? The answer is yes, it will. The intent is for all the videos from this event to be recorded, and then you can just play them back from the agenda. So if you missed it, you can watch it. So hopefully you enjoy it. At this point, we have about 10 minutes left. I can either field questions, or I can walk you through the Happy Meal. And so let's first start with questions. I know you're all curious about what I mean by Happy Meals, but all right. So you can feel free to hop in with questions. I'm going to start with Happy Meals. So someone said, when we talked about a product offering, it's kind of like a Happy Meal. And I thought about it for a while into this presentation. So we're going to have a hamburger Happy Meal, right? It's burger, fries, and a drink. You can choose the drink, but you can't choose something that's not on the list, right? You can't choose Mountain Dew. It's not offered by McDonald's. Condiments aren't specifically listed, but they're available. And there's a set of toys that aren't specifically listed, and they're chosen not by the consumer, but by the merchant, by the McDonald's. Okay, so there's only, we're going to define a term called the meal abstraction term, or meat. And if there's only one menu item, hamburger Happy Meal, you wouldn't need it. But there's also McNuggets and cheeseburger, so those are your meat. Sorry, vegetarians. The item you get is guaranteed by the meat. The side dish you get is a choice the consumer makes, again for drink, and the toy is from a given set. Although sometimes for those who have had kids who've had Happy Meals, sometimes you get the leftover toys from the last offering and you don't get the toy from the current one. So, you kind of get what you get. In the UK, so now we're interested in internationalization is interesting. There's also fish fingers and crispy chicken wrap, which are not available in the United States. The side dishes are different. The drinks are a little bit different. Same with France. So you actually can picture me doing all the research on what Happy Meals look like around the world. And yes, that's what I did. So again, same basic idea, but in the international offerings, you have some variation. So here's our meat. Again, so croque McDo Happy Meal in France is different from a hamburger Happy Meal. So this is for those of you who've seen EMA Avails, you'll hopefully get a chuckle out of this. This is what a spreadsheet avail would look like for a Happy Meal. Along the left, you have the identifier, which is the meat. You have the kind of meal, which is the work type for Happy Meal. You have different territories. They have a description, dates when they're available, pricing, and currency of pricing. Nothing there's too odd. That's what you expect when you're offering Happy Meals. So now we're going to go a little bit more into the technical side. A nugget consists of nuggets plus side plus drink plus dessert plus toy plus box. Same for the other experiences. A side is a choice. So sides, and it's regionalized. So you have US, UK, and French sides. Same with dessert. No dessert or in the US or UK, but you do in France. And toy, which I just sort of identified here. So far, so good. So let's tie it back to the theatrical. Let's tie it back to our world. A hamburger is the theatrical version. The cheeseburgers are director's cut. McNuggets is another movie. Fries is bonus material. Desserts is bonus material. The toy is the trailer, and so forth. So just as I was able to define a Happy Meal in terms of meats, which is it would be in the identifier scheme in the ALID. We have all these different pieces tied together. Not quite done yet. So you can also do a la carte. Entree would be the same meat, no extras. So you'd have to define that as a separate offering. You can also offer beverages, snack, etc. So having the basic asset definitions are there. And then for adult meals, same idea, and promotions, buy two, get one free, and so forth. So these are all, so anything that we're talking about the film world, you can also talk about in terms of the Happy Meal world. Now you may, there's of course a little bit of silliness to this presentation, but it's actually the most effective presentation I have for people to understand ALID. And the meat is the ALID analogy. And that's actually kind of an important point in Avails. So thank you for that little diversion. And that'll conclude the session, and we can move on to the next one, which actually I think we have a couple of minutes left if anyone has any questions. But this session ends at 3:50, and then there's a session at, I think, 4:05, which, by the way, is a great session. It's going to have some some real experts in the supply chain who can talk about their experiences. So any questions from anyone, either live or on the chat? All right, well, thank you. Oh, I see one popped up here. Let's see. Good. Scott appreciates the Happy Meal, so I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's also, by the way, one of the videos in the class. So thank you, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you all in the Masters of the Supply Chain session in a little bit.
Thank you, Craig.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.